So we're talking about the bow and we're talking about connecting to the string. And so we're wanting to use the phrases pull from the left and push against the right. And the reason we want to do that is because we want to get used to the idea that the string is not a flat surface and the bow is not a flat surface. So here's a series of small little motions that I want you to start trying for yourself that can then lead over time into a sense of contact with the string that you can, in the moment, enjoy and develop through long notes. And I'm thinking long notes particularly because of there are a lot of those long held notes in this movement, right? So let's try these are 8 steps in this exercise. Here's the first one. Go to the frog of the bow at the G string level. That's right. Feel all that connection from the left side of the string. And when you're ready and you've got a good feeling of contact, play a very short little note that has what we call an ictus, which just means a bite at the front end of the note. And then once you've done that, bring the bow to the tip to the E string level and rest it there. Try that for me. That's it. Okay, now from that's it. So this is step 1. See if you can make the motion towards the tip a little slower. So you're really kind of using this as a slow, focus-oriented exercise. When we get to the tip, let's do the same thing. Measure out all that room you have on the right side of the E string. And when you're ready and you've got a good grip, play a very short up bow and then land back to the frog at the D string level. Okay, try that for me from here. Try that one more time. Try that one more time. Just make sure you get a really good grip. If you make a funny sound like it's not a problem right now. Just a little bit of that. And then land on the D. Okay, I've lost your video again. Sorry. Where are you? There you are. Sorry. Okay, so once you're at the D string level, the rules are the same, but now we have less room to be able to do this. So you want to be a little more careful. Take a look at all the room you have on the left side of the D string. Get a good amount of contact with the bow into the string. And then same idea. You're going to play a short note with a good start to the sound and then plant the bow on the A string level and leave it there. Excellent. Then on the A string, again, we're taking a look at the A string. We're going to play with the contact point. We're looking at all the space you have between the A and the E string. We're going to put a fair amount of pressure into the A string, pushing against the right. And when you're ready, play a short little up bow. That's it. Okay, so those are the first 4 steps. The next 4 steps are the same order of strings, but just reverse bow. So we start again at the frog, but instead of playing it down, we're going to play an up, which means that we focus on all the room we have between the D and the G string level. And when you're ready, play a little up bow with a good ictus and a good bite, and then bring the bow back to the E string level. That's it. And then go back to the E string level. That's it. Now from the E string, of course, you can see how this works. We're going to look now to the left side of the E string, playing with the balance of the bow into the string, all that room you have between the A and the E string. And when you're ready, we're going to pull a down bow on the E string level. That's it. And then we land back at the D string level at the frog. Here we're going to look to which side of the string? Say it again.
The right side.
That's right. So you're looking at the right side of the string. You're playing with all that balance you've got in the hand. When you're ready, you're going to let an up bow happen, and then come to the A string level at the tip. And what side of the string are we looking at now?
The left side.
That's right. And then when you're ready, play a small down bow. That's it. So the exercise basically looks like this. Can you try that for me? Do it as slowly as you need. It's more important that we have really good, clear focus here as we approach each action into the string. Go, you missed one. Go to the A string. A string is the fourth one. Try it again. Miguel is frozen on me there. Good. Back to the frog on the G string level and now start up bow. Perfect. Okay, Miguel, this is great. What I'm going to suggest is that you will see benefit from this exercise in a very short amount of time, but you need to make sure that the focus you're using in the exercise is two-pointed or two-pronged. The first is, as you were already doing, make sure you're pulling or pushing against which side of the string. That's the first most important thing. The second most important thing is to really wait before you move. Make sure you've got a good grab. Depending on which string you're in, it will have a different feel to it. Make sure you've got a good grab into the string before you commit to the direction of the bow, all right? Once you've done this for a while, then playing something like a long, slow bow becomes a different experience than playing it with Swiffer bow, because Swiffer bow has that one dimension to the action into the string, whereas this will have many possibilities how you cut into the string. You know, the French words for down and up, we say down and up, right, for our direction of the bow. The French words are actually pull and push, translated. So tirer and pousser, those are the words for down and up. And it makes complete sense because we really are pulling one string or pushing against the string with the bow. Super important. Okay, now if you were listening to my session with Carolyn a few moments ago, I was telling her this idea that in the Baroque era, and of course Mozart's not Baroque, he's classical. In the Baroque era, sometimes notes are disjunct and sometimes notes are conjunct. Did you hear me saying that?
Yes.
Okay, so in this piece, the first two notes are officially disjunct. Now, it's not necessarily the case that the rules of interpretation changed on January 1st, 1750, when the Baroque era supposedly ended. We look back at these things in hindsight and we can say, oh, that was a very Baroque idea, or oh, that was a very romantic idea. But of course, the reality is much more in a state of gray. Where things changed and how they changed over time is a topic of great debate, and lots of people are still researching that in the year 2020 here. So I think in these two first notes, you could say that Mozart, who was very young when he wrote this, was still playing with Baroque tendencies in his playing. Maybe not all the time, but I hear these first two notes not being connected. I hear them with the separation. And then the arpeggiations that follow it they have a slightly different articulation because of their conjunct or disjunct nature. Now, I'm not suggesting that you spend all your time looking at exactly where it's conjunct and exactly where it's disjunct. But like I said to Carolyn, I think when we know this as a possible way of articulating into the string, then we can use it as another tool for our interpretation of the piece. And if we use it one day and we don't use it the next, not the end of the world. It's more that it's available to us as a possibility. And I'll just say that as an interpreter of music, that's what you want the most of. You want to have the largest possible arsenal, if you want to use that word, arsenal of technique abilities and musical possibilities. That's like this. It's a thing that you have with you all the time that needs to grow and grow and grow as you develop and get older. Okay, now I'm going to ask you to play from the very beginning. I'm going to stop you after after the first little moment before the tutti comes back in. Okay? Bravo, bravo, bravo. Okay, do you know, again, this is kind of a thought from left field, it'll seem, but it does have a point to what our conversation is. Do you know what the word topography means? I can't hear you, sorry. Can you speak a little louder?
relate to a location?
I'm still not hearing it. I'm sorry.
Is it related to location?
Yeah, that's one way to think of it. Think about, as an example, the last holiday season around Christmas, I was actually in Las Vegas for a couple of days, and we went to the Grand Canyon after that. And in the Grand Canyon, there are, of course, valleys that go on for a while and beautiful vistas. And you could say that that is a topography, the way things do this, right? Inside Mozart's writing, there's a lot of topography. The topography goes up or down in a lot of his phrases, and we can use that as a starting point for shaping phrases. And for me, the other big topic I would love to keep your thoughts in your near future as you continue to develop this piece is to think about shape in phrases rather than thinking too much about just notes. So the shape of this line, that goes from high to low. That's the topography. It goes from high to low. That probably means we don't need to be as loud all the way through. It could start forte and maybe be a little less forte at the bottom. And then when you start the second part of this phrase, that's all in the same general zone of topography. And then it changes again. You get the idea. Like I'm going down, I'm going up, and I'm using some of those shapes to help my interpretation of the line. So it's not always just about the same pulse of the rhythm being reflected with the same sound in the instrument. So can I get you to try this again from the beginning and use the topography that Mozart writes and see what you find with that as you play through. Bravo, bravo. Now, does that feel different to you? I can't hear your response, sorry. Yes. So here's the big point, I think, in my thoughts for you with this piece. I think you want to start thinking about the inner experience of how you are interpreting this piece. And the inner experience can be a guide for you. In other words, you can develop your natural musical instinct just by thinking about how shapes exist in sound. In Mozart, that's one of the greatest things to put your focus onto. And then let that be a guide to how you shape what he has on the page. Because you'll notice that Mozart didn't write many opportunities for us to know what his answers were musically. He didn't write a lot of mezzo piano, crescendos, subitos. None of that was really in his language. A little bit more for Mozart than for Bach, which is almost non-existent, but it's still not a lot. And if you've played anything by, let's say, romantic composers like Brahms or Lalo, I know Carolyn was playing Lalo, or she mentioned it last hour, those are composers that have a lot more indications in their music as to how to shape what they've written. But Mozart doesn't write a lot of answers for us, so we have to use our own instinct to create that shape and that line as best we can. And the other thought I would just leave you with here as my final thought for you for today, in your movement here, isn't there an opportunity for like a little, or maybe I'm mistaken, is there a little opportunity towards the end to have a little tiny cadenza?
Yes.
Yeah, so I think the cadenza can be the personal property of Miguel. It should be something that maybe you write yourself, and you can use the material from not just the last movement, but also use material from the second and first movement if you want, as a starting point for how you design your cadenza. Now, if you ever start doing a lot of improvisation in your life and play some jazz, you'll see how structures work. Basically, inside little cadenzas like this, which are not big cadenzas, but little cadenzas, you are probably going to find a sequence that you will play with and then deviate from, and then with that deviation come into the dominant key for a return to your tonic, which is what you're returning into the orchestra part after you finish playing. All that's fancy talk. Basically, it just means that if you start writing your own cadenza, that's me finding a way to kind of make up a little sequence. And then and then finding a way out of 5-1 or dominant to tonic. But I would encourage you to spend some time having fun and write out your own cadenza. If you do and you play it and you don't like it, you just turf it, get rid of it. You can always go back to the starting point of recreating something and find something over time that you really think is worth putting into Mozart's great piece. And you know, I don't often hear this concerto, but you've reminded me today how much I really love it. So thank you so much for playing today, and good luck to you. You're doing great. Yay. Applause icons everywhere. Yay. Okay, now I've got Leanna playing Chrysler.
Hi,
Hey, Leanna, how are you?
I'm good.
Good.
How are you?
Let's hear your A. I'm gonna actually maybe take your A. Okay, let's hear it. Let's do it.
Oh, do I have to introduce myself?
Sure, why not?
Okay. I'm Leanna Oliver. I'm playing La Gitana by Chrysler, and I am 17 years old.
Great. Bravo. Bravo, bravo. Great, 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 great. Clap, everyone. Everyone clapping. Great. Okay, so first of all, how long have you played this piece?
I think beginning of March.
Okay, great. You're doing a great job. And outside of this piece, what other repertoire are you playing right now?
I've also played the Bach A minor,
Okay.
same thing as Carolyn, and I've also played Lolo, same thing with Carolyn, yeah.
Great, terrific, terrific. So, hey, what do you find at this stage, Leanna, of learning this piece? What do you find to be the challenges or you?
It's the timing for me, like figuring out what I want to do with the timing,
Can
especially
you
because it's like different tempo changes.
can you speak to me a little bit more about exactly what you mean with that?
Um, I had a trouble in the beginning with like just timing, getting the notes in the right time, and trying to also make it not so on time because it's you can make it's recitavo.
Right.
Yeah.
What is that?
And then
What
there
is
was also in oh sorry.
what does recitativo mean?
Isn't it's like recital? It's like
To recite
yeah,
means
to recite,
to. What does recite mean?
to speak.
Yes, 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 yes. So you heard what I was saying to Carolyn about Bach,
Yes.
about it being spoken language and music rather than sung language. So here at the beginning, it's a little bit like that, right? It's a little like you're speaking ideas, but the difference here, the speaking ideas at the beginning is all out. It's all whoa. It's very flamboyant stuff. Okay, so have you practiced this opening in terms of the timing that you're talking about? Have you practiced this opening measuring out the bow, how much room you want to use per note?
No.
Okay, so a really great exercise in when you're faced with something like this is to measure out the bow. So the first trick is the first measure, right? I would spend time I would spend time measuring out the bow that way. First, I do it with one note per stop. Which fingering are you doing, by the way? I don't want to do bad fingerings. Which one are you doing?
Going up to 3, and I'm staying up here, and then I go down to 2 on the G.
So all on the E string?
Yes.
Okay, so then after doing one note per stop, measuring out the bow that way, maybe do two notes. Sorry, B natural. That would be another way to do it. And then, of course, you could do three notes at a time. If you do that, it adds another layer of understanding to the physical reaction of playing into the string, which is really just layering in information in your brain. If you take apart how we play the instrument, it's a function of how we think about it. And so all these little impulses we're giving to the string are things that the body remembers and the mind remembers. And you then trigger that memory when you play any given piece. It's not just Chrysler, it can be Mozart or Bach, whatever. So knowing that that's the case, it's sometimes a really good idea, a way to help iron out timing is to give more impulse per measure and per beat, making sure that you're really using maximally how much bow you're going to need for any given stroke. So that's the first thing I would suggest. Um, you know, maybe about 6 years ago now, 5 or 6 years ago. Boy, my memory's not what it used to be. I think it was 5 years ago. I was playing a concert at the Library of Congress in Washington, D.C., and they have Chrysler's Guarnerius violin there. And so I was using his violin for 2 different concerts. And I have to say, it's nice playing on great instruments, but that instrument is one of the juiciest, darkest, most responsive instruments I've ever put under my chin. I could put as much pressure into the string as I wanted and it would never break. It would always be giving me more. It was unbelievably luxurious in sound. So knowing that and knowing Chrysler would play this instrument a lot, I look at a piece like this and I think, oh, think of the instrument he was playing this on and the sound that he would be able to come up with in his mind, knowing that he could get that sound out of his Guarnerius. So a lot of this piece is about being rich in the sound, and I think that's the way in which we need to go into the string. We need to be allowing a good amount of weight into the string, even for things like all that stuff is really with a fair amount of weight into the string. When you were first learning how to play violin, how old were you?
I think 7.
Okay, and you're 17 now?
Yes.
Okay, so my experience has been in teaching all these years, my experience has been that most of us, when we first get the instrument under our chin, our relationship to the bow starts on day one. And for some people like me, when I first got the bow, I grabbed it and went, oh, bow! And I wanted to make all kinds of noise and scratch, 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 scratch away. Other people, though, they'll get the bow and they'll take it like this, and they'll go, oh, okay. And then, oh, I made it sound. They basically have an approach to making sound, which is either hovering in the torso, upper torso, a lot of energy up here, or dropping it. And that starts early on in how you play the instrument. It's some of the habits we lay down when we're very young. So in hearing you play, I actually think, and this is really great, I actually think that you're like me. You couldn't wait to get sound out of the violin. You have a memory of that?
I think so. Yeah, I have a pretty good memory of that.
That's my impression, because the way you get into the string is with a great amount of weight, and I love that. Now, it's not necessarily good or bad to start learning the instrument one way or the other, but it's good to know which one is your primary way of approaching sound so that you can balance it out with its opposite. All right? So while we've just spoken about everything being very rich, you already have a great rich approach to the string, which I love. It sounds really great. But I do think the way in which you speed the bow could be with a greater amount of variety, which means in your case, sometimes a lighter action and a faster speed. Not always, but I think that is a variable that you want to investigate. So let's try it from the opening.
Yes.
Let's start from the opening. Just the first like measure basically, and I want you to play it at a very slow tempo, and I want you to stop the bow. Just play that much for me. Good, good, good. Now, let's do the same thing, but this time, make note of how much weight you can put into the string when you're in the upper half of the bow, and how much you don't need to press when you're towards the right hand, when you're getting close to the frog. So here it's very strong, and then I'm getting actually a little lighter, and I'm using a little bit more length per note. See the difference? So I'm staying in the upper half a little longer than you are right now, and I'm pushing into the string a little bit more on that up bow, only for the first third to half, and then I'm using more bow length per note and a lighter action as I get towards the frog. Try that for me. It's all right. It's all right. You use less bow for the first few of them. Sorry. Now look at where I am as I'm about to start the fourth beat of that measure. I'm here in the bow. You get there at about there. All right? Let's do the same thing for me. Yes, that was excellent. That was excellent. Let's do this one more time. That's right on the money. So we are now, with this exercise, we're measuring out not just the length of the stroke, but we're also making note of how much pressure and how much weight the bow is using, whether we're at the tip or the frog. So I think you can do that for all of these measures in the whole opening section, this little mini recit cadenza thing. And so by measuring it out that way, you really layer in more information with how the physique feels and how the mind operates that action when you play. I want to hear this little moment before Allegro giusto e ritmico. So this is what, in my part, I downloaded this today. I have, this is where you start going, the cadenza ad libitum. Can I just hear that? Good, 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 good. Okay, so there's a moment here where the harmony changes. Do you know where that is?
Towards the ending of the all those notes, it's different thing, like a different.
Yep. You know what I actually think? I think it's the low note. It's the low A.
Mm.
Because you'll notice when you start this, there's A sharps, right? And then when you reach down to the lowest note we have, it changes modes there. So can you give me a little bit of what they call an agogic stress, a little bit of a lengthening on the low A before you go all the way up back to the top G sharp trill?
Okay.
Try that. Something like that. I think you want to play with that a little bit more in practice and with your teacher, of course. But I think there's a way in which what we are playing when you get to the start of this is one harmony, and then you get out of that harmony into another harmonic land, which is actually the dominant of the pickups into allegro giusto. So each harmony has a slightly different feel, and as a result of that, a slightly different inner experience for you too. So there's a difference between each of those thoughts as you progress through. Fine. Okay, so can I get you to go from the third measure of the allegro now? Good, good, good. So there's only one dynamic, eh? He says forte.
Mhm.
You imagine everything should just be forte?
Kind of, but I guess not.
I think it could certainly be strong. The forte means strong, so it can certainly be strong. But I think there's a shape to the phrase, and when you say the word shape, immediately you should be thinking, okay, that means not every note gets the same power. So right now, as you play it, you've done a great job of being able to play it basically perfectly. But I'm missing that element of shape that you could put yourself into. In other words, you are the interpreter, and you need to interpret the information he's given you. And if he hasn't given you much information, then it gives you even more freedom to try to do your own thing. So I would think, there's something, I'm making it up a little bit, but I think that kind of approach to the phrase is in style with what he's asking. Can you try that for me and try to find a shape that you think is appealing for this phrase?
Mhm.
That's great. That's really great. And I think every time you play it, you want to be putting a little bit of attention to how the shape works. And you'll hear people play this in a variety of different ways. It's not important that you copy other people's ideas. What's more important is that as you play it, you are true to your own ideas of what the shape could be. And I'm saying this again because he didn't give us any real information. He just said forte. That's not much. So going on from here, you're doing a great job with these. I really like those a lot. So let's jump now. On my part, can we go from the poco più lento e tranquillo from there?
Okay.
Okay. So we've got two. Here we have two different markings, right? He has two measures of poco più lento e tranquillo, which means what?
Little slower, little calmer,
Yeah, and then he writes poco più vivo, which means.
a little more lively.
Yeah. Now, is there a way in which we could make those changes right on the measure lines? So when you start, it's a different sound, it's a different character, it's a different speed of vibrato. Then it's a very different character, right? So now we've got. And also, I have noticed in this version I have here in front of me, which I believe is actually his own edition, he has an implied slide. I think you could put as much slide in there as you like. I think it's very, very much in style. So then that little moment there, so much information in one quarter note that we don't want to push it through too quickly. It just sounds a little too flippant, particularly because he's written poco più lento e tranquillo. So all of that, wait, and And then on the downbeat of that Poco più vivo, an entirely different idea. He also writes forte on that downbeat too, right? Okay, try that for me from here. Now back. Bravo, bravo, bravo. Boy, you sound really good, Leanna. This sounds really good. You know, the first version of Poco più lento only goes as high as an E, right? And then the second version, 2 measures later, it goes to the F sharp. So with the F sharp being different, I would suggest making a different color and a different sound because we're showing the difference. So the second one, something more gitana, more gypsy. That's not even really a word you're really supposed to use anymore, right? Gypsy? You're supposed to say Roma now, I think. Okay, let's try this again from there. Keep going. Bravo, bravo, bravo. Okay, so similar idea as what I suggested in the previous page. This più lento, quasi andantino, it starts with that pattern, and when it repeats 3 measures later, that difference is what we want to showcase. And we make a difference in the sound when we reach that G sharp. And maybe also, again, there's room for a little slide action here, I think. He even writes in his part to go to the D string on that C natural. I think that's an invitation to make another goosey slide there. So let's try it from there.
From the first one?
From the first one, yes, please. So have you played any other Chrysler before this piece?
Yeah, I have.
And which ones did you play?
The Rigodon and Sicilian.
Sicilian and Rigadoon? Yeah. That one, yeah. Any others?
Not that I can remember.
So in his writing, Chrysler often does what he does in this piece, and that is start with a tonality or a mode, which is minor, and then towards, as he gets towards the end, he inevitably goes to major. I just think to myself, when he does that, we need a new sound, and we need a new character, and we need just a new lightness, because we've been in the dark of the minor keys for a while, and then the sun is back out. So when you get to this allegretto, grazioso, 2 words that to me basically mean light, I think the bow here can be lighter again, maybe a little bit more towards here. Don't go right across the fingerboard, of course, but not so close to the bridge. And a little faster in the action, I think, is not a bad idea, just so we have a different quality once we reach the major mode. Um, and then, it's all sunshine basically after that. Everything here towards the end is like one of those, what is it, 346 days out of the year in Las Vegas, nothing but sun. There's some sunshine happening there. So can we just try maybe from, and then I want to hear a real difference in tone. Something that really gives me a sense that everything's going to be all right in the world. And one day the pandemic will be over. Try that for me. Yeah, that's great. So we're going to have to stop in a moment here, but I just want you to allow yourself when you're playing this piece to have that inner experience of what each harmony might feel like. A former teacher of mine used to say, and I think this is so brilliant, every key is like a blanket that you wrap yourself in. Every harmony is like a different blanket. So, oh, D major. Oh, I love D major. Or, ooh, F sharp minor. Don't like that. It feels a little weird. Or, ooh, D minor. Oh, E flat major. Oh, it's a feeling that you attach yourself to from within, each mode or each tonality. And then the melody that occurs as a result of that is something that is a reflection of how you feel internally. So I think with this kind of piece, which is all about the charm, you do such a wonderful job of playing it right now. I would encourage you to deepen your inner experience of what all this music feels like. Allow all these harmonies to be things that have very different characters. And yes, then that'll be reflected in how you approach the technique. We've already talked about a few of those ideas. But more importantly is how you feel it here. Because this instrument we're playing is basically a box. And it's a box that makes sound. And so I call it a sound box. But this is sound box number 2. Sound box number 1 is here. Not me, it could be you. And it's us. So whatever comes out of sound box number 2 is a direct reflection of what's going on in sound box number 1. It can never be any other way. It can never be any other way. So I would encourage you with this kind of piece, you obviously can play it super well. Allow yourself to go into that inner experience of how all these harmonies, how those impact you, and then express that through the notes that Chrysler has written so beautifully for us to use. Boy, Leanna, what a wonderful treat to hear you play. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
You're very welcome. Applause icon, applause icon. Now I've got, who do I have next? Christian playing, oh, Paganini. I have my Paganini part here. Hi, Christian. How are you? I can't hear you. Are you with mute on or no?
Hello?
Ah, there you are.
Oh, yeah. So, yeah, I'm kind of anxious right now, so.
That's quite all right. Nothing to be anxious about. Hey, talk to me for a second. Have you played any other Paganini caprices before 16?
No, not
And
this one.
what would you say before this piece was the most difficult piece you ever played?
I don't know. I played like a lot of pieces, so like.
Right.
I think.
And any particular pieces you played in the recent past that you really enjoyed?
Mm,
Did you enjoy all of them in some way?
yeah, some way.
Yeah. Okay, so then let's hear it. Let's hear your Paganini.
Okay. This is.
Bravo, bravo, bravo. Good. See, you had nothing to feel anxious about at all. That sounded good. Yeah. Applause icons from everyone. Hey, it sounds like you've worked really well on this. And of course I'm only hearing you play now for the very first time. And I'll tell you a few things I notice. I notice that you have a very long fourth finger, left hand. Lucky you. Lucky you. If you've got that long of a fourth finger, the good news is that you have got the long fourth finger. The bad news is if you've got a really long fourth finger, you now have no excuse ever to play anything out of tune. Ever, ever, ever. Yeah. Okay, so I want to talk a little bit about, well, two things jump to mind right away. You know, there's that section here, the whole thing towards the bottom of the first page, that whole business. So that's a weird kind of a stretch that we don't do that often in repertoire. And there are exercises to help stretches that are to varying degrees good. And there's one exercise that I was given years ago by one of my teachers that I'm still using to this day. And I'm going to show it to you guys, but I'm going to show it to you with the caveat that I don't want you all to suddenly run away and start doing this like for 20 minutes a day or something, because it might hurt your hand. So I'm going to show this to you, but I then want you to be really, really, really careful that if you start doing it, you promise to only do it with a light action on each finger. And if you feel any kind of pain at any given moment, you stop and you shake out your left hand. So this is the way it works. I find an octave, a D octave on A and E string, and I hold the top note while I pull my first finger back towards open A. So now, for those, of course, who are used to playing a certain kind of repertoire, this is just a tenth. It's just a tenth. So you could play tenths all day long. If you can play them, fine. Nothing really fancy about that. However, if you keep going with this exercise and you put the left hand increasingly up the fingerboard by a semitone and you continue to go to the A, then you are going to start to feel a real stretch. So now F sharp is where I max out. After that, it's just impossible. But I've been doing that since I was about 18 years old, so I don't recommend that you do this for 20 minutes every day just to get your stretch working. But you could do it maybe for a minute and see what it's like. The way you approach it is to keep your thumb basically a little low, so you're not going to keep it high like that. You put a little low to help the stretch. And then every time you pull the finger back, the first finger back, you allow the first finger pull to be something that guides you to the open A string without releasing the fourth finger position. So I'm going to ask you to try this for me. Start on the D natural octave that I just gave you, or that I just started with myself, and let's go slowly as I demonstrated, just easily down, repeating each first finger note with a slur. Let's try that. So find a D octave. Oh no, it's D. It's the D fourth finger on the E string. Starting there, and then first finger D. All right. So again, I'll do it one more time just so you see what it looks like. It's try that for me. Try again. Pretty good, pretty good. Okay, now don't push it out. That's probably pretty much enough for right now, but you see how that works, right? Are you feeling any sting in the left hand at all? No? I can't hear a response.
No, no.
Good. So don't do any of this if you're in any kind of pain, of course, but it is a great little technique to open up the hand. Now the other stretch exercise I'm going to show you is without the violin in my hand. You take your left hand and you make the sign as from Star Trek, the Spock sign. I don't know if any of you are Star Trek fans or not. And with that openness between your second and third finger, you take your right fist and you then gently open up the space between your second and third fingers. And again, don't do this all at once. If you can't do it and it hurts, don't. But gently, if you're able to open up this part of your hand, that opens up this part of your hand that enables your stretches to be easier. So again, I open up from here, the Spock sign, and I do a little bit of that. And of course, I've been doing this for years, so I can get my fist all the way in there. It's not something you should try and do and master in a week, but it is a good exercise. And when you're playing Paganini or Izai or any of these more difficult pieces, it's a good idea to have the stretching mechanism well oiled. All right. Okay, so that's the first thing I wanted to talk to you about. The second thing is your right hand and the way in which your bow attacks the string. So we did an exercise with Carolyn that I'm going to ask you to do right now as well. And that is to hold the bow too high. And I want you to play here. I want you to play there and play the Paganini very slowly, but keep it towards the front end, or yeah, keep it towards, yeah, that's it. Let's try it at a slow tempo and keep it towards the bridge as well as towards the frog. Good, good, good. Let's try the same thing one more time. This is very good for you. Try it one more time. Keep going. Good. Good, 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 good. Okay, now without talking or anything, I want you to play the opening again with the bow held in the normal fashion. Good. Good, good, good. How does that feel?
I don't know exactly how to like explain it. It's just I don't know. It's more loose, I guess.
Good, good, good. That's the idea. So here's the second kind of big idea I want to share with you today. How old are you now, Christian?
16.
16. Okay, great. So, one of the things about the way the physique works when we're playing violin, when we get to playing more and more difficult repertoire, it inevitably seems that we're going to have to give even more effort to really play something really well. But sometimes that sense of effort translates into a physical action which is too tight. In other words, the body grabs something for the purpose of achieving playing, in this case, a Paganini caprice. So I think what you want to try and play with is the idea that at a certain level of technique, which you're clearly at right now with the left hand, it's no longer about grabbing the fingerboard. It's now about releasing the mechanism. Think about what it would be like if you touched your stove by accident and it was on and it was hot, and you would go, oh, that kind of really quick reaction away from the stove element. That kind of release in the hand, in the left hand, is something I think you need a lot more of, which just means that instead of doing this with the left hand to play a note, allow the natural weight that you already have in your left hand to hit the fingerboard and focus more on the release mechanism. And when I say release mechanism, I'm pretty much squarely going into the base of the knuckles here. The knuckle base here is what gives us our sense of pullback. So anytime you pull a finger back, it's really the base of the knuckles that's doing it this way. So that action for playing Paganini or other really difficult things, I think you need more of that, because as you play this, you are doing more of a grab. The body is grabbing into the instrument, and that's also showing itself in the right hand with the bow, the way the bow is working into the string. So the exercise I just gave you by holding the bow incorrectly and then going back to the regular hold, that is a way of tricking the mind or tricking the body into relaxing again, because it was more tight for you to play with the bow held high, and it's much easier to play it with the other bow hold. Therefore, you had a sense of relaxation internally that then translated into an easier sound and also an easier left hand action. Because whatever we do on one side of the body, the other side of the body wants to do the same thing with you. It's like driving. Do you drive a car yet, Christian? No? No. One of the things, when you do go to driving school, one of the things they will teach you is to not look off the road for more than a couple of seconds. Because if you do, you will start driving that way without realizing it. It's just the way we are wired here in our bodies. If one side of the body does something, the other side of the body wants to join and help it achieve that. So if one side of the body is tight, then the other side is going to get tight with it. But if you consciously relax one side, then the other side is going to be relaxed as well. There's another way to practice this as a practice session for you when you're trying to go through difficult repertoire like this, and that is to put the left hand only on harmonic pressure when you press down on the string, and use the bow with full pressure. So you're tricking the physique to do the opposite. And of course, it sounds horrible. It's never going to sound good, but it's a great exercise for you to really master the command of the left hand and not allow it to grab the fingerboard unnecessarily. So can you try that for me? You're going to use full pressure with the right hand, but the left hand is going to play as if you're playing harmonic pressure. Try that for me. That's all right. That's all right. So you'll probably have heard other teachers or other people say things like you need to release tension. Have you heard people say that? Yeah. So this is really what this is all about. You're trying to find effective ways in your practice to know that you are consciously able to effect change physically on the instrument. So that means for you getting used to a sense of release more now as you play more and more challenging repertoire rather than relying on a grab. All right. Now that can also reflect itself in the bow, not so much when you're playing super fast, but if you're playing this slowly, you can do this by slowly releasing every stroke rather than playing with an accented détaché with the bow. So you can release here and then see how that impacts your left. All that stuff is just, it should feel like it's easy, right? I mean, that's what you're aiming for. The way to be masterfully playing this stuff in front of an audience is to give them the impression that no problem, yeah, no worries. You want to be aiming that direction in terms of your preparation. That physically it feels like it's piece of cake, no problem. What's next? Paganini, no problem. I eat Paganini for breakfast. Give me some Izai. Izai, no problem. I had Izai at lunch. What are we having for dinner? Yeah, so make it that kind of habit for yourself. Tell me, before we stop, I know we've got also some Ravel to hear, but before we stop together, Christian, are there things in this caprice that you're having difficulty with that you have questions about?
No, it's mostly like just like getting the high notes and stuff, like, which it's kind of easy with practice, but like
Can you give me an example of one?
measured 14.
Yeah.
That one.
Okay. Try that for me again. Play it slower and notice that your bow needs to go towards the bridge as you ascend. So as you're going from a lower position to a higher position with the left hand, also bring the bow along with you going this direction. Because as you're doing it right now, your bow is actually going to meet your left hand. That means that as you shift higher, that is happening. So do the opposite. As you shift higher, bring the bow towards the bridge. Slowly. That's it. So that's the first step. Now the next step is to measure out what's happening in your left hand. The last three notes that you play before that top note, can you just play those for me? Right. So again, first step is to make sure that the bow is going towards the bridge. You're going back to playing it over here. That's the first step, and that's really important. Once you figure that out, then the measurements in the left hand need to be understood. So in this case, the measurements by semitone, 1, 2, 3, 4 semitones apart. How many semitones is that? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So in order to really nail that high B flat, I would actually practice a bunch of times, and then to really nail it, I would add one more note. And then back and forth between. That's the way I would practice that. That way you're really relying on the math of the measurements between each pitch. Because once you know how it feels in the left hand, that's definitely a big plus. But sometimes adding in the layer of information of exactly what the interval distance is can help you enormously. Is that clear as an idea? Great. Okay, Christian, thank you so much for playing Paganini today, and you sound really good. Keep doing what you're doing. Now we have one more person doing a little bit of Ravel. Abigail. Hi, Abigail.
Hi.
How are you?
Good, how are you?
Fine. Hey, you know, I only know one other person in my life who has the last name of Knox. And he's actually a very good friend of mine, and he's from Tennessee. Is your family with any family members from Tennessee?
No.
No? Okay. You're strictly a Nevada clan, so to speak?
No. My dad is from Pennsylvania.
Pennsylvania. There you go.
Yeah.
Okay, so you're going to play the opening of Sigan for me?
Yes.
Terrific. Let's do it. Good, 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 good. Very good, very good. Well done. Applause icons from everyone. Yay. Hey, Abigail, how long have you played this piece?
Just a few weeks.
Oh, good for
I
you.
started 3 4 weeks. Yeah.
And what was the last kind of big piece you played?
Carol by Sarasate.
Great. And any concertos you're playing right now, or unaccompanied Bach?
No.
No. Okay. So you know this piece is obviously gypsy again, to use that word. And so with that being the case, we're using, or Ravel is using, patterns of rhythms that are based on old Magyar or Hungarian folk tunes. So one of the primary gestures of both those, shall we say, another composer who's inspired by that would be Bartok. So a Bartokian sound, but it's not Bartok who did it. It's actually originally from folk music. One of the big gestures is this: yada, yada, which of course happens right at the very beginning of this piece, right? And it happens in a variety of other locations throughout these first 2 pages. And I think that first gesture, yada, needs to be a little heavier. In other words, the first note needs to be a little heavier from you, so it never has the chance of sounding like it's da-da. I remember the first time I ever heard this piece, I was probably 15 years old when I first heard it, I think, and somebody played it, and I was sure that if I looked at the music, it would have a pickup note followed by a downbeat on the long note. Da-da. But then when I saw the actual music, I saw, oh, it's not like that at all. It's the first note on the downbeat. So that is definitely a reference to the old Hungarian folk tunes. And I think as a result, it needs to have an extra punch. Now, I don't have the music in front of me for this one, but I don't remember. Is there an accent on that first note or no?
No.
Okay, so let's try. Let's try to show the difference between the notes, the short notes that are on the main pulses and the ones that are not. For example, that's on the beat. This is not. This is on. This is not. So you hear how those need to be treated differently?
Yeah.
Okay, let's try that. Good, 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 good. Now, in technical terms, to make that one note a little longer and heavier, I think it's really just a function of the hand. Less, so you're not actually using more length in the stroke and the arm to go with it. You're really using only a minimal amount of arm and more just fingers. And then anything that is a pickup short note, I think you can make that pickup shorter. So you really are showing the difference between the on the beat and the pickup ones. Let's try the same thing one more time. Great, great. Now from there, going on, again, we've got on the beat short notes. On the beat, on the beat, on the beat. All those guys are on the beat. So again, we just need to be conceiving of the short note as, should we say a soft accent, if there's no accent there, but yada, not yada. I'm not sure if I'm speaking that across the electronic waves here, if that sounds the way I want it to sound, but it needs to be strong on that first note each time, so we really hear yada, 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 da, 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 da. There's every reason to believe that that needs that kind of pulse. So can we try now from here? Try that. Bravo, good, good, good. You're doing a good job of shaping this. I like it a lot. And when you start this, maybe save the bow on the long down bow a little longer and focus on the vibrato speed instead. And that short note, by the way, is another pickup note, so it should be shorter. So I'm looking for the shape that I think you're already hearing in your ear. I'm looking for it to be supported with greater amount of sustaining in the lower half of the bow when the notes are longer. And that way you can develop that tone and it can become something which is a little more electric towards the end of each long note. So again, I would play small bow here or shorter, let's see, more attention on the left hand and a slower bow. And then I speed it up before I reach the G sharp. See the way that works? Can you try that for me from here? Yeah. So that bowing that you're doing right now, when you finish this down bow, is there an accent on that single note? Do-dee.
No.
Okay, so can we make it shorter still? This guy here, down bow or up bow doesn't bother me, but just a little shorter in its rhythm. Let's just try again from here. Beautiful. Very, very good. It's very, very good. Now going on. It's almost like it's a different person speaking all of a sudden, right? All of the big flashy stuff we've done is now being followed by a very sweet and maybe a little quieter than what you're doing right now, something that's smaller. Then a little bit more confidence. More confidence. All right, so we're really using the starting point. We're using that starting point to build a much larger phrase that goes all the way to there, basically the bottom of the first page. So if we play from here again and think about that being the starting point of a very long increase in tension and drama that goes all the way to the bottom of that first page. Can you play that much for me from there? Bravo. That's great. That's really great. So again, thinking those long thoughts and long lines from where we started to where we just stopped, every new step, it's like there's an inner experience of it which is even more dramatic. So internally you're feeling a drama that's unfolding bigger, and bigger all the way to the top note, and then finally that crazy descent back down the G string to the bottom. Okay, now going ahead, I know our time is short, but I want to talk a little bit about a technical thing for you, and that's these octaves. That whole business. So as a general rule, I think that when we're playing octaves that are anywhere below fifth position, for almost all of us, we should be, and when I say almost, I mean people who don't have gargantuan hands, but for most of us, we should be using our second and third fingers as part of the framework of the left hand to support 1 and 4. So even though we're only hearing 1 and 4, 2 and 3 have an active role. And that role is to not be in the air. Their role is not to press hard onto the string, but to be on the string below or beneath your fourth finger. So when you play these octaves, I'm watching your left hand and you were doing this, da 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 da. The trouble is with that feels to me, when I play with my first and fourth finger that way, it feels very unstable. It feels like my left hand isn't with the same kind of power. And I need stability for my pitch to really be solid. So the stability comes from the framework being adhered to at the base of the knuckles, which becomes weak if I do this. So the base of the knuckles suddenly loses its solidity if I do that with my second and third fingers. So just by planting them back on the string without any extra force, just on the string below or beneath the fourth finger, your stability becomes stronger. Now here's the tricky part, or I shouldn't say tricky, but here's the detail that is important that is often overlooked. Every person's hand will feel better in one of 3 possible shapes in the fingers here. When you put 2 and 3 down, they shouldn't be randomly there. They should be in the most comfortable position inside the block. So for me, the most comfortable position inside the block is to have my second finger a tone away from my first finger, and my third finger a semitone away from my second finger. That means there's a tone between third finger and fourth. That means my hand looks like this when I'm playing my octave. Now some people, it'll feel better to do that, which is semitone, tone, tone, and some people will feel better this way, tone, tone, semitone. Everybody's different, and there's not one that's better than the other, but you should be using which one works best for you. So again, I plant my fingers down to play those octaves, and I'm not just looking for 1 and 4 to find their homes. I'm using 1, 4 supported by 2, 3, the center of the hand. And for me, I'm placing them a tone away from my first finger and a semitone away from my second finger, which leaves another tone between 3 and 4. Does that make sense to you as I explain it?
Yeah.
So now that idea, let's try that. And let's try hearing that opening of the second page of this great opening of the Sigan, and plant 2 and 3 where you think it might be the most comfortable. And just to repeat what I said, don't add extra pressure into the string. Just allow them to rest there behind your fourth finger. It could be as light as harmonic pressure if you like, but it needs to be there and not separate from the string. Try. Careful. Careful, careful, careful. You'll notice as you pay attention to it, you'll notice that the habit is for your second and third fingers to leave the string. So visually, keep an eye on your second and third finger as you play that. Exactly that. So it's an important thing to put into play for all octaves for sure, but there will also be an opportunity to use variables of this idea when you're playing double stops, triple stops, and quadruple stops. And it basically means that anytime you're using anything in the left hand here that needs tension, and usually for us that means anything that's not a single stop. If we're playing a double stop or a triple or a quadruple stop, usually that's more difficult than just a single stop for us. So the way to do it is to measure out the feeling of the silent fingers. So you could be playing not an octave, you could be playing a 4-part chord, and the silent note would be maybe the note that the bow doesn't hold on to. And you measure out what those relationships are like within the hand. If you're playing a triple stop, then maybe it's the finger that's not being heard. You need to measure that out within the hand so that all of the fingers from the base of the knuckles are accounted for when your left hand hits the string. It's basically the hidden information of our technique. It's not stuff often we always think about because it's not the fingertip that we're hearing immediately, but it is important that the left hand has a relationship to the fingerboard, which is one of constant contact, or should we say maximum contact? Because every once in a while you'll play something in a piece that has you do this, or you have to go back to an open string. And that's fine, but when you go back to having a finger down, take note of what the other fingers are doing and ask yourself, can my other fingers support the role of the finger that I'm hearing with my bow. Very, very good. I have to say, this is one of these pieces I've played this most of my life, and I love hearing it because everyone has their own version of gypsy inside of them. So I encourage you to develop that for yourself and enjoy the rest of what this piece has to offer. You're in for a great thrill ride with it. Thank you so much, Abigail.
Thank you.
Awesome. So now I'm gonna play.
The C string.
So what I'm gonna do, I mean, first off, thanks. We want to thank Mark for a really great class. A lot of really useful information.
Oh, look, I'm getting.
Yeah.
Yay.
Aside from playing the violin, you taught them how to use the little clapping things. I don't even know how to do that. I don't know where I find that. Oh, the reactions. Is that what it is?
Probably.
There it is. I got it.
Yeah, I'm finding it too.
There it is. So before we end, if anybody has any questions, then, I mean, you have, I mean, maybe if Mark has a minute or two to spare, we can allow that. And what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to unmute everyone. I had to change the settings around just because of that incident. I now understand why the schools were having issues with Zoom. But anyway, so I'm going to unmute everyone. And if you have a question, then feel free to jump in and go for it.
Any questions from anyone?
I have a question. Hi. Okay. So I was told that you do jazz, you play jazz, and I was wondering, how do you incorporate the violin into jazz when you're playing?
For asking that question. When I first started learning how to play jazz, it was not on violin. It was on 10 years old when I started playing saxophone, and I had a really amazing music program in the school that I went to as a child. So I was playing saxophone, and I had an incredible band teacher. We had a really great stage band, and that's how I learned how to read the chord symbols and the things you might be aware of. What they call lead sheets for many people playing jazz. That's how I learned how to. Then it wasn't until I was in my teens that I decided I'd try to play it on the violin. And I'll just say this, the difference between playing jazz on saxophone and jazz on violin, and I know my saxophone friends yawn whenever they hear me say this, but saxophone is pretty easy because it's one fingering for everything. But just think of all the possible permutations and combinations on a violin. There's no such thing as one fingering for everything. There's endless possibilities. So it's a learning curve that even though I've been doing this most of my life now, there's still ways in which I am integrating understanding left-hand technique and bow technique in my jazz playing, and that continues to develop as I get older. So I'll say this though, I do feel like having spent so much time in the jazz world now, that when I come back to playing, for example, just supposed to be playing Schubert Fantasy a couple of weeks ago, all that got canceled because of coronavirus. I find that going back into playing classical music after I've played a lot of jazz, it's like I'm able to interpret the composer's thoughts a little bit differently because when you're playing jazz, part of the role of you as a soloist playing jazz is to play music in the moment, to be an instant composer. So the instant composer idea, when you're learning how to play solos in music, you're learning how to interpret harmonies. You're learning how harmonies are supportive or not supportive of any melodic idea. And so when I come back to playing unaccompanied Bach or playing Schubert or playing whatever I'm playing, it's from a slightly different viewpoint, and I feel like it does enhance my understanding of what composers may have meant from the interpretive level. Does that answer your question? I love talking about that because I find I find many of the greatest musicians that I've ever had the great fortune to work with over the years are people who love both sides of the creative experience. They love the form, and they're enraptured listening to some of the great works of classical music, and then they love the freedom of the improvisation of it. And so, for example, at the time of Bach, a lot of composers were also great improvisers, And some composers that I'm sure you would have heard of, like Corelli or Tartini, they would write pieces that would leave an awful lot of empty space in them for you, the interpreter, to improvise in. So that's a part of the musical experience that was around until Beethoven, and then it started to basically die pretty quickly. And then it's come back in the last 50 years or so. We see a lot more people who are both composers and performers, and composers of classical and performers of improvisation. Great question. Thank you, Carolyn.
Hey, Mark, are you teaching any jazz at the university in Toronto?
I have a string improv class that I teach. I taught it when I was at McGill for several years, and now that I'm at U of T, I teach the same class there. And it basically goes from early Baroque medieval music up until present moment avant-garde. So jazz is actually only part of that class. But then there is a strong jazz program at the school, and I will inevitably be with them a few times throughout the year, even though my primary role is in the classical modern violin department. Any other questions?
I have a question. So I noticed that like you were teaching us those like weird stretching stuff on our fingers, and like you were like showing us a whole bunch of stuff to improve ourselves. What do you like to do as a warm up usually when you play?
Question. I do have a regular, and it's a combination. This first one is very, very, very straight. It's designed to get used to a sense of balance at the knuckles of the hand, because I'm sure you're aware, the way our hands are designed, the greatest power in the left hand is here, close to the thumb. So this exercise is to exercise this side of the hand to have a sense of balance, which can somehow be the same as this. So it starts. Very, very simple. And I do that depending on what day it is. I'll do it in different positions and different keys, but it's to exercise all of the different spacings between the left hand, whether it's what I just did, which is tone, semitone, tone, or you could do one that is semitone, tone, tone, or tone, tone, semitone. So it's very basic, but it's very, very important for getting a real sense and feeling of this side of the hand being equal, or as equal as possible, in flexibility and strength as what is naturally over here. Just do this for all the violinists there. Just do this little exercise for me. This is super cool. It's super easy, but it will show you the example of what I'm talking about. If you all put your left hand up as if you're going to swear allegiance to the United States. Can I see your hands up? Put your hands up. Okay. Now, with your left, this is your left hand, not the right hand. With your left hand up, put your first finger down and towards your palm. All right, just your first finger. Notice how not that easy to do that, right? Then second finger, not so easy to do that either. Third finger by itself, fourth finger by itself. Do that pattern one more time together. Let's do the first finger towards the palm, back up. Second finger towards the palm, back up. Third finger towards the palm. Fourth finger. Now, as the exact opposite, try this. Put all four fingers down at once. How easy that is? See how total simple that is? When you compare the feeling of that action to this action, you get a really clear idea of how, when you move the hand into violin position, the base of the knuckles are your biggest friend. All right? Because this is where you're going to have your possible, this is where you're going to have all of your strength and all of your reactivity from the string outwards, like I was talking earlier to Christian about this. You need to have a reflex, and it's at that point at the base of the knuckles that you really develop that. So with my left hand, I'm trying, when I play the instrument, I'm trying to avoid doing this, because that gets to be so tiring so quickly. But I try my best to do as much of this as possible as I'm playing, and I do that all day long. Everyone feels that as an example? They can see that? Going on from there, after I do that, then I'll do usually a little Dunas exercise, which is a brain game more than anything else. So it's to combine a few different actions all together. So there's left hand pizzicato, and then there's lateral motion of fingers. So I'll do that as the next part of my warm up. Then after that, usually I run in thirds and then some fingered octaves. And that'll pretty much get me into a feeling of like I'm in shape to start practicing for the rest of the day.
Thank you.
Other questions from anyone?
I have a question.
Please.
So you're talking a lot about scales and double stops and how to practice them. So my question is like, how do you translate like practicing scales to like putting it into a piece? Because sometimes I have like a problem with, I practice the scales, but sometimes it's hard to like keep the same technique while I'm doing the piece. Like sometimes I'll get tense.
We're having a hard time hearing you, Mark.
Yeah.
No, you sound good.
Not. Okay, is that better? You hear me now? Okay. So Miguel, it's a really great question, and it's a very valid one because when we're practicing scales of any sort or we're practicing exercises, that's clearly not music, right? Would you agree with me? That's not music. Those are the ingredients. Think about it as if you were constructing a sentence in English from beginning to end to tell like chocolate ice cream. Those are all words, but they don't really mean anything unless you put an energy behind it and you then portray a character. Like, I really like chocolate ice cream. This is the key to understanding the answer to your question. Because when you transfer playing scales or exercises into real music, you have to take into account the shape and the attitude and the emotional standpoint of what you are saying musically. To use another example in speech, I used to take acting classes with this really wonderful teacher in Vancouver. And he would insist that I learn to speak Shakespearean text. And the reason was because I didn't understand it at all. I would read Shakespeare and I'd read it for him in my lessons with him, and he would just look at me and go, "You have no idea what you're doing." And of course, I thought, well, I'm speaking all the words correctly. What am I getting wrong? And it was him that pointed this out to me, that in my interpretation, quote unquote, of speaking Shakespeare, I didn't have any interpretation at all. I was just reading the words. And so for him, it had no real content. There was no glue between each word. So what I would have to do would be to change my emotional standpoint from which I deliver the words. So if I give you an example, there's a speech at the end of one scene in a Shakespearean play where a guy who reveals himself as being a trickster, he goes, "And as I'm an honest Puck, if we have unearned luck now to scape the serpent's tongue, we shall make amends ere long, else the Puck a liar call." Now, I just did that with all of the verve of trying to speak Shakespeare, but if I tried to say the same words without any of that emotional content, it would say, and if we escape the serpent's tongue, if we err along, else the Puck a liar call. Basically, there's the problem, right? So every time you're trying to figure out a musical phrase, you have to get inside the mind of the composer in some fashion. You use your imagination to be a time traveler. If you're playing something from 200 years ago, you play time traveler in your imagination, you go to that time and you ask yourself, what could Bach have possibly meant by this? Or what did Schubert really want by this? What did Chrysler ever really want with this? And then you decide, oh, maybe he really wants this to be joyous. Or, oh, maybe he's asking a question. Maybe he's saying something very declamatory and he needs everyone to understand it. So all of those possibilities are there, and it doesn't really matter which decision you make. As soon as you make a decision, it is going to impact how you connect those words, or in our case, notes in a play, notes on the page. If you really want to, you can actually watch. There was a piece written for me a long time ago, maybe 10 years ago, but we made a video of it recently. It's for violin/narrator and brass band, and it's up on YouTube. You can find it easily on YouTube, and it's me playing fiddle with a brass band, but also reciting Shakespeare throughout. And that's why I had to do the training with that coach, was for this particular piece. And if you listen to it, of course, you know, I'm no Shakespeare genius by any stretch of the imagination. You can probably tell that I'm putting the same kind of energy into playing the phrases of the music on the violin as I'm trying to do when I speak the text of the Shakespeare. I'll send a link to the maestro here, and he can share it with you, just in case anyone wants to listen to it. But as Miguel, that is one of the biggest and most important questions anyone can ask, because you're absolutely right. Sometimes when we are trying to transfer that work we've done in technique and put it into a piece of music, where's the answer? Like, who gives us the answer? So you have to decide what position you are starting from, and then let that answer create a shape in the phrase, and then you're ready to go. Thank you for such a great question. That was good.
Now, I don't think we should take that much more of your time. You've been here for a while. But for some reason, we can't hear you when other people are here. Give me 1 second. I don't know how to fix that. But before you go, and I'll mute myself after this. A lot of these kids are eventually going to come up to do their college auditions. Some of them might go into music, some might not. I don't know. Maybe they'll minor in music. If they were to show up at U of T to audition for you, what are the things that you, or maybe you and maybe your faculty members, I don't know how you guys are doing it there, but what are the things you're looking for to bring them into your school?
So, you know, the musical world right now has been in a state of change for the last decade and a half. It used to be that we would all go to music schools, like when I was a student, and we could then put ourselves into the track of getting our excerpts ready to go do an audition for an orchestra, and then get a job in the orchestra, and then that was it. But that's all changed a lot. And so a lot of people who are coming into schools for music now, at the undergraduate level, you do need to have a certain level of ability, whether it's technical or musical. They both need to be, relatively speaking, high. But we're now in a situation as educators of looking to find a way to really tap into the individual's gifts to discover for themselves what it is they want to do in music. I'll give you a couple of examples from my own past, my own students. I had a student that I taught for like 3 years. He was a good kid. I had no idea at the time I met him what he would really do. But then over the course of those few years, I began to see that he had a bit of a mischievous and entrepreneurial spirit to him. And he also wanted to try a lot of different types of music. So usually, traditionally, when you go to music school for playing classical violin, you learn your Mozart, you learn your Bach, you learn your Paganini, etc. And that's still true. But that's not the end of the exploration now. That's the beginning. So once you've learned how to play your Bach, or you have a decent appreciation for how to play Bach and Mozart and Paganini and whatever other composers, Tchaikovsky, Violin Concerto, all of that's still there. But after that, there's another world of exploration where you can choose different paths that are good for you. So in the case of the student I just spoke about, he started his own Baroque training institute. He started a folk music festival in California. He basically has done all these things that I think students now want to try and do. They want to do something other than one path. And so while music schools used to be just geared towards the one path, the better music schools are now saying, okay, you've got to get your X, Y, and Z figured out. And then from there, We're going to find out what your best gift is to give to that musical world out there. So from my perspective as the teacher, what I'm always wanting to do is convince the student that what they're doing when they play the instrument is a gift to the listener. If you can figure out what it is you have to offer, what you have to give, once you've figured that out, you're not going to want to do anything else because it's going to feel so great. That giving is going to feel so great. You're going to want to do only that thing. I think you probably have an example of that with your conductor here. Clearly, he's found a path for himself. And when I knew your conductor, there was no hint that he was going to be a conductor. I didn't know that about you at all. Like, who knew, right? So, but he found that within himself, and his entrepreneurial spirit. I mean, talk to me about it. I didn't have any idea that he had this cigar business on the side. I didn't find that out till years later. Like, I didn't know any of those things about him. I knew him as a violist, and he was a good violist, and he was a decent student. People liked him. But all the other sides to what he had to offer the music world, the things that you now know about, those were surprises to me. So I think what we're looking for when you come to audition, of course you want to sound good. Of course you want to sound like you can play in tune. You need to sound like you know how to use the bow. Primarily, that's the biggest downfall of a lot of students when they come in. If the bow is very rudimentary, even if the left hand is great, there's not a lot that we can do because the bow needs to be your voice on a violin. That's really what it is. Your right hand makes you you and makes me me. So we need to see those things at point of entry, but then we want to know how much you want to give in this whole musical life. And when we tap into those things, it's not like you need to make a decision in 4 years of undergraduate, but I want to see that you have a path forward for yourself after that's over so that you can take the steps that are right for you. And then you can plant yourself in a community, just like your boss here has planted himself in Las Vegas, and he's dedicated himself to you guys. Look at all your faces here. This is his life. He's dedicated himself to you. This is his musical voice. He's giving over to you, and then as you guys get older, you will then give it over to somebody else, somewhere else. Maybe it'll also be in Las Vegas. Who knows? Maybe you'll be his teaching assistant in 10 years. You never know. But that's really what you want to do. When you come into music school, it's a competitive zone for sure. But for our students at U of T, I'll just say the violin area at U of T is probably the most collegial of any big school I've ever been at. I've taught at McGill, I've taught at Stanford. I've never experienced such an easygoing, collegial bunch of violin people. Because violinists, we're usually the troubled guys, right? We're usually the ones with the biggest attitudes, the biggest egos, biggest problems, biggest headaches. But this particular team is very positive, and we're very supportive of each other. We will regularly keep the door open for any student from any studio to come in and listen to our lessons. And we will, if somebody wants to have a lesson on me and something and they're from a different studio, as long as they tell the teacher and the teacher says fine, then they're welcome to come into my studio and have an extra lesson or something, and vice versa. So it's a very positive space to be in right now. More than that, know what you have to offer as best as you can right now, but work really hard to show that you can use the bow well, because that means that you've tapped into the big key of expression on the violin, which is the right arm. The left hand, it only kind of takes so much knowledge to figure out how the left hand works. And once it's done, it's done. And to be honest, we basically do what the Russians told us to do about 120 years ago. And we're still doing it now, and it works like a charm. But the moment-to-moment experience of your right hand and your right arm in conjunction with the violin is what makes you an individual. So you show us that you've got a sense about that. It doesn't need to be perfect, but if you show us that you've got a sense about that, you're on the right track. Thank you guys. What a pleasure spending time with you all. And I'm looking at some of the pictures here, and I'm looking at the sun streaming in to your windows, some of you, and thinking that I just saw snow about 3 hours ago. I am quite jealous. So thank you all for being such a great gang, and good luck to you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I can hear him. I'll leave. Okay.